Hello everyone, and welcome to my long overdue Araxxor guide. In this video I will be comprehensively covering all of the mechanics to understand about Araxxor, as well as some of my strategies for killing him. I've watched a lot of guides from some of the other RuneScape YouTubers, and everybody seems to miss a lot of important information, so I'm going to cover everything completely in the hopes that you know everything about this boss and you'll be able to walk in and with no surprises and hopefully give it a shot and have some fun and make some money for yourself. As for the setup, this guide will be for using ranged. Now, Araxxor can be fought effectively with any attack style, but in my opinion the safest and the best way to learn is using ranged, so you should definitely try this out before you go experimenting with anything more dangerous like melee. I'm using Superior Elite Void for the accuracy bonus, but the armor is not really super relevant here. I'm sure you've seen there are plenty of YouTubers who've done no armor kills at high rage levels, so if you have, Death Lotus or Armadillo or Pernix, that's acceptable. For the aura and scrimshaws, I recommend accuracy boosting things. Araxxor has relatively high defense, so even with tier 90 and overloads and curses, you won't be hitting him 100% of the time. That's another reason I favor Void. But the Sharpshooter aura and the Scrimshaw of ranging particularly will improve your DPS a lot. If for some reason you can't get a Scrimshaw of ranging, then you can replace it with a Scrimshaw of cruelty for better damage, but I find that the accuracy helps a lot more. I have an Asylum Surgeon's Ring. I'm using Ascensions, obviously, an Amulet of Souls. This isn't super important. You could replace this with, a Dragon Rider Amulet or a Blood Fury or anything like that. My inventory setup, I have the Ectofile for a quick tele back to the bank, and also to the Summoning Obelisk to restore my familiar's HP after he gets hit with cleaves. I have Holy Overloads, an Adrenaline Potion, an Anti-Poison for the final phase. I have a Sign of Life, a Portent of Life. You could also use a Portent of Death. That's not really important, that's just there as a fail-safe in case I happen to screw something up. I've got 3 super restores. You could actually get by with less than this if you're using the Penance aura. I have 8 Ceradomin Brew Flasks, and then the rest of my space is just filled with food of my choosing. I tend to use cavefish because they're inexpensive, but they also heal very well. My quick prayers are set to protect from magic and the ranged version of Turmoil, whatever that is. I think it's Anguish or something like that. I recommend using Revolution, at least for your first few attempts with Araxxor, because on Phase 4 things tend to get pretty hectic. You will be prayer switching. It's very important that you have Deflect Magic and Deflect Ranged on your bar for that. On the left side of my bar, everything here is pretty much just a standard ranged setup. I'm favoring Needle Strike because of the enhanced DPS. You want to have Death Swiftness on here, and I'll show you a few instances when you want to use that. Other than that, you need to have Anticipation and Freedom on here, and if for some reason you have some extra space, you might want to pop Surge on here as well for Path 2, but that's not particularly important, and I tend to just open it over here. And finally, it is very important that you have Auto Retaliate disabled, or you will kill yourself reflecting off the Web Shield. Before we begin the fight, it's important to understand that Araxxor can spawn in 3 different styles. Now, these can be distinguished by the colors of the tips of his legs. The red-legged spawn is a melee-using spawn, the blue-legged spawn is a magic-using spawn, and the green-legged spawn is a ranged-using spawn. Now, even though these are all listed as having no weaknesses, they do, in fact, have the associated weaknesses and resistances of the combat triangle. So, for example, the melee-using spawn is much more resistant to ranged and much weaker to magic, and you should definitely be seeking out the spawn type that is weak to your attack style when fighting Araxxor. Trying to fight an off-style spawn is difficult and unpleasant. You'll use a lot of food and the kill will take twice as long as it conventionally would. Now, each of these spawn styles also has a passive damage over time effect that can be inflicted by its auto attacks. Each of these effects will hit you 5 times, and if it activates again while the current duration is active, it will add an additional 3 hits rather than 5. The melee's damage over time is a typeless bleed, which is 100 to 2000 damage. This can be cleared with Freedom, or tanked alternatively, since you tend to be using freedom to prevent special attacks. The magic using Spawn's damage over time effect is a stat reduction and run energy reduction. Alternatively, if you're using overloads, it will slightly reduce the overload timer, but in general this can be ignored, which is another reason I prefer to use ranged when fighting Araxxor. And the ranged using Spawn is a poison effect, which can be blocked with an anti-poison potion, and alternatively can also be healed using the Poison Purge aura, though if you do have the Poison Purge aura active, it will reduce the timer by 1 minute for each hit that heals you. There are currently 2 ways to encourage Araxxor to spawn in the attack style that is weak to your attack style. The first is to fight Araxxor in an instance. Anytime Araxxor spawns in an instance, he has a 95% chance to spawn in the style that is weak to your attack style. This can get expensive at the moment because the instances automatically close when you leave them, so you can only get 1 kill per instance, though I believe Mod Chris L is working on an instance rework, which will change this and you'll be able to get the full hour out. The other option is to either purchase or receive as a drop from Araxxor an item called the Araxxite Pheromone. Anytime this is held in your inventory, fighting Araxxor outside instances also has a 95% chance to spawn in the style you're looking for. Now, if for some reason you get unlucky and Araxxor spawns in a type that you're not interested in fighting, I recommend you just participate in the kill until the first time Araxxor uses the Web Shield special attack. This lasts long enough that you can disengage combat and lobby out of the kill, or alternatively you can X-log if you feel comfortable doing that, though that could result in a death. Jagex has made it impossible to lobby out of the kill before combat has engaged to encourage people to try and fight the off-style spawns, but I really don't recommend this. It's really unpleasant, and if possible, lobby out of the kill. Finally, the last thing we have to talk about before we actually get started on the fight is Araxxor's Rage gauge. Now, the rage value is a scalar quantity which is applied to all damage you receive from Araxxor and Araxxor's minions while inside the Araxxite hive. It's expressed in terms of a percentage, so anytime he has a rage value greater than 0, you'll see this icon on screen, and hovering over it will tell you what the value is. This is influenced by many different things during the fight, but the most significant contribution comes from getting previous kills in the same day. So for every time that you've killed Araxxor previously the day that you're currently killing him, there will be an additional 20% up to a cap of 300% from that contribution. So at 300%, every damage you receive is going to be 4 times, and it's extremely difficult to get up to this point. This is sort of an anti-camping feature. You can reset the rage anytime during the day by consuming an Araxxite pheromone, but this can be pretty costly because they're valuable on the Grand Exchange, and this value also resets to 0 every day at the daily reset time. With all of that covered, we're ready to begin the actual fight. As we start Phase 1, the first thing we should be doing is approaching the web wall of whatever path we've decided to take for Phase 2. When Araxxor spawns, we're going to light that on fire and engage combat with him, and use Anticipate to protect from whatever his first special attack is. Now, Araxxor has 3 special attacks that he uses on this phase. The first of these 3 special attacks, which you can see on screen right now, is known as Cleave. When Araxxor performs Cleave, he will magically drag the player into melee distance in front of him, and then perform this large sweeping motion with his front legs. This targets anything standing in up to 3 game tiles of space in this full arc area. This includes your familiar and also any minions that Araxxor has spawned, though it's worth noting if he targets his own minions, it will increase his rage level. The base damage from this attack is different depending on what space you're standing on. The closer to Araxxor, the more damage you'll sustain. The highest base damage is roughly 4,000, and this of course scales with rage level, so this can easily one-hit you once you've gotten a few kills in for the day. It's also an easy attack to avoid. If Anticipation or Freedom are active, you will not be dragged into melee distance. As you can see in this instance, I had Anticipation active and I was not dragged, and I could simply ignore the fact that he had performed it. If for some reason I did not have Anticipation or Freedom active, and he did drag me in, I still have plenty of time to click to the far right of the screen and escape the distance in time to not receive any damage. Now, one thing worth noting is if this does happen, when Araxxor performs the sweep, the click radius on his legs also increases dramatically, so it's very easy to misclick on him and not escape the cleave in time, and this is another good reason to have the Portent of Life or Portent of Death around, but with a little bit of practice, you should be able to avoid this every time. Now, after Araxxor performs Cleave, he will perform 5 auto attacks before he performs his next special attack. The second special attack is the Web Shield. A large web dome will appear over Araxxor, and he will heal 1000 HP every 2 seconds for a total of 5000 HP. You can prevent the healing by dealing damage to him during this time, but any damage you deal will be reflected back to you. The 5000 HP in the grand scheme is a little inconsequential, so my recommendation during this period is just to disengage combat, eat if you need to, and if it's available, prepare Death Swiftness, because this is a great opportunity to do so as soon as the shield dissipates. Now, after using the Web Shield, Araxxor will perform 5 basic attacks before performing his next special attack. The last of Araxxor's basic special attacks is the Cocoon. These little spiders will approach and wrap you up in it, where you will receive damage over time. The only way to escape this attack is by spam clicking anywhere on screen. The amount of times that you need to click to escape is reduced if you have Anticipation or Freedom active, such that you will only receive 2 or 3 hits if those are active. Now, the base damage for this attack is 200, and this scales up by your rage level, and after performing it, Araxxor will perform 4 basic attacks before he performs his next special attack. The order in which Araxxor chooses to use these special attacks is randomized, but at least for the first and second phases he will never use them back to back. Now, for the remainder of Phase 1, our objective is to count Araxxor's attacks so that we can use Anticipation and Freedom to prevent the oncoming special attacks, and to whittle his HP down as low as possible while the web burns. However much HP he has left on Phase 1 and 2 is going to influence Phase 3, which I will talk about later on. Your objective is to get him down to around 5000 HP and then proceed with the next phase. Regardless of which path you decided to take for Phase 2, Araxxor will add a new special attack to his repertoire. These eggs will drop from the ceiling either in groups of 2 or 3, and a fireball will slowly close in on your player. When the fireball makes contact with you, any eggs that are within a 5x5 space of you will be destroyed, and the amount of damage you receive will depend on how many eggs you destroyed. So, if you destroy 3 or more eggs, you receive 300 damage. If you destroy only 2 eggs, you'll receive 1200 damage, and if you destroy only 1 egg, you'll receive 2100 damage. If you destroy no eggs, you receive 3000 damage. So all you need to do to deal with the special attack is run over to wherever the eggs are and make sure that they're within 2 spaces of you. After performing the Egg and Fireball special attack, Araxxor will perform 5 basic attacks before he performs his next special attack. As we cross the threshold onto the Path 1 area, a new icon has appeared at the top of the screen indicating that Araxxor has gained a reservoir of 20 minions, which he can summon in groups of 5. This will occur in the place of some of the usual special attacks, though he's still capable of performing all of the basic special attacks we discussed in Phase 1. The animation that you'll see when he summons minions are these small groups of spiders scurrying from under him. Now, the minions that he can spawn come in 5 different varieties. The 3 basic spider types are here at the top. Imbued, Bladed, and Spitting spiders simply deal magic, melee, and ranged damage respectively. They actually have appreciable DPS, especially when Araxxor is on high rage levels, so you do want to deal with minions as quickly as possible. Now, each group of 5 also has a chance to spawn one of the 2 special types here on the bottom. On the left side is the Mirrorback Spider. Anytime a Mirrorback Spider is alive, any damage you deal to Araxxor is going to be reflected directly back to you. However, any damage you deal to the Mirrorback Spider will be reflected to Araxxor. Now, these are extremely dangerous, especially if you don't notice that one is spawned. You can very rapidly kill yourself, especially if you use some sort of a threshold ability and Araxxor's on a high rage level. Something like Snapshot can kill you right through your Portent of Life in 1 hit. So be very careful, and anytime you see that scurrying animation, it's best to disengage combat. And finally, on the right side, we have the Pulsing Spider. Anytime these are alive, they're going to heal Araxxor periodically for 5000 HP at a time. You can generally kill these before they even get one single shot of healing off, so they are not a big deal. After the animation signifying Araxxor is summoning minions, he will do 5 basic attacks before he performs his next special attack. Our primary objective on Path 1 is simply to reduce Araxxor's HP down to 5,000 or less like we did on Phase 1, and to deal with as many minions as possible while simultaneously avoiding all of these special attacks that we've detailed so far. It is not worth waiting around on Path 1 for Araxxor to summon all of the minions if you've depleted his HP bar before he does so. Anything that you haven't dealt with thus far will simply be spawned in Phase 3, so if you fully deplete his HP, just continue to the Phase 3 area. As we cross the threshold into the Path 2 area, we have also gained a new icon at the top of the screen. This is a measure of the amount of acid left in this pool in the middle. Your objective here is to lure Araxxor into the acid in the middle, which is going to progressively fill this bar of acidity that's appeared at the top. And when it's filled halfway for solo players, we're going to lure Araxxor onto the ramp at the right side, where it will slowly drip off, decaying the ramp and allowing you to pass into the Phase 3 area. There are a few important things that have changed on this phase. The first is that Araxxor will, for some reason, not use the Cocoon special attack on this phase. The second is that Araxxor is going to start approaching melee distance. It's still possible to stand one space outside to avoid his melee attack, but this makes it easier to lure Araxxor into the acid, as well as to make use of fragmentation shot and better bleed damage, so keep that in mind. It's also worth noting that as Araxxor's acidity level rises, his rage level will also rise. Araxxor has also gained a new special attack on this phase. He will stomp his front legs and target one location on the floor with a projectile that looks identical to his basic ranged attack. When it contacts the floor, it will produce a small pool of acid, and after a few seconds, an acidic spider will crawl out of the acid and start targeting the player with a timer over its head. If it reaches the player before the timer fills, it will kill you in one hit. However, if the timer expires before it reaches you, it will explode and there will be no consequence. So it is very important that you keep an eye out for this special attack and get as far away from the acid pool as possible. When we have the prescribed amount of acidity, we lure Araxxor to the top of the ramp, and this is usually the moment that I choose to use Surge. When you're at the top of the ramp, it's very easy to get hit by a Cleave as you're sort of cornered by Araxxor, but Surge is just long enough to spin you around to the other side of him and leave Araxxor in the proper place for acid to drip. The period of time that it takes to decay the top of the ramp is just long enough for Araxxor to get 2 special attacks off, so keep that in mind, and when the ramp finally decays, we will simply jump down into the Phase 3 area. As we cross into the Path 3 area, we'll receive a notification that Araxxor has retreated upwards and is blocking out the light, and the path is going to go dark. Now while we stand in the darkness, we're going to receive incrementally higher damage over time until we find the spot of light and stand inside of it. So this spot is going to change periodically throughout the entire Path 3 period. And the only special attacks that Araxxor is going to use on this path are the Egg and Fireball specials. However, he will continue to use his basic attacks from the ceiling, and he will also now use both magic and ranged regardless of what spawn type he was. So you're going to need an anti-poison to protect yourself from the damage over time effect of the ranged attack, and you can choose to prayer switch like you see me doing on screen now. This isn't entirely necessary, but it does help mitigate some of the damage. Now after we've gone back and forth along this path and stayed in the light a few times, we're going to receive another message that Araxxor is preparing to charge. When he does charge, we will receive an on-screen prompt to dodge the attack by either pressing the arrow keys or clicking the corresponding buttons on screen. Araxxor's charge attack will deal some amount of damage to the wall blocking the end of the path depending on how effectively we dodged it. After 2 successful dodges, we will break through and head into the next area. The correct dodge for when Araxxor's legs are spread wide at the bottom is the up arrow key. When Araxxor's legs are to the left, the proper arrow key is the left arrow key. When he swings his arm to the right, the correct dodge is the right arrow key. And lastly, when his legs are together in the middle, you use the down arrow key. Once you've successfully dodged 2 charges in a row, the wall will be broken down and you can pass freely into the Phase 3 area. As we begin Phase 3, the first thing you'll probably notice is a new icon at the top of the screen. This is a reservoir of health that Araxxor is going to be healed by until it's fully depleted. The amount of health he's healed by is equal to 80% of the sum of the HP he had remaining on Phases 1 and 2. So prematurely ending either of those phases is going to extend Phase 3. The second major change is that Araxxor's attack speed has been increased dramatically, so much so that even when you're counting attacks and using Anticipation and Freedom to avoid special attacks, sometimes they're going to stack in such a way that you will not have Anticipation or Freedom off cooldown and available for you to avoid these special attacks. The remaining mechanics on Phase 3 are going to be dependent upon whichever two paths are open at the time that you're fighting Araxxor. If Path 1 is open and there are any minions remaining in the reservoir of minions Araxxor is allowed to summon, he will continue to summon them in Phase 3. If Path 2 is open and there is any acid remaining in the pool, then Araxxor will periodically summon these highly acidic spiders. These can be lured to Araxxor, who will consume them. They heal 5,000 HP, and they will increase his rage level on Phase 3. However, if you choose not to feed them to Araxxor on Phase 3, they will increase Araxxi's rage on Phase 4. This is a difficult decision to make. I generally ignore them because it's not obvious to me whether it's better to have a more dangerous enemy on Phase 3 versus on Phase 4, and there's no appreciable difference either way in my opinion. Araxxor will also continue to use the one-hit Acid Spider's special attack if Path 2 is open. If Path 3 is open, Araxxor has the ability to temporarily darken the arena. He will create a light splotch similar to the way that he does on Path 3. You simply have to run inside it to avoid the incrementally higher damage over time. After he activates this special attack, he performs 7 auto attacks before his next special attack. The final change on Phase 3 is Araxxor is now able to use his special attacks back to back. With all that said, our objective is just to reduce Araxxor's HP to 0 while sustaining as little damage as possible from his special attacks. When we've fully depleted his HP bar, Phase 4 will begin automatically. Once again, there are several major changes as we begin Phase 4. Araxxor is going to be killed by his mate Araxxi, and we're going to resume the fight against her. There's a brief period where combat disengages at the beginning of this, where you'll want to stall your adrenaline and also sip an anti-poison potion, as she will begin using magic and ranged attacks depending on which deflect prayers you're using. So now is the time to start prayer switching. The speed at which her ranged and magic attacks reach you is slightly irregular, so you'll need to spend a little bit of time with trial and error getting the timing just right to prevent them from stacking on you. She continues using all of her basic special attacks as well as anything left over from the paths that were open at the time that you were fighting. If Path 1 is open and any minions are remaining, she's capable of spawning them now. If there was any acid remaining in the pool in Path 2, she will absorb that to increase her rage level. However, she will not summon the one-hit acid spiders on this phase. If Path 3 is open, she will continue to use the temporary darkness special attack. The last change is that there's no longer a predictable number of attacks after each special attack. They're completely irregular, so use Anticipation or Freedom anytime something is not active and is available to use. At 50,000 HP, you'll receive an on-screen notification that Araxxi has become enraged. At this point, she will give up using all of her special attacks and will only proceed to attack you with her basic attacks. Continue prayer switching and build up your adrenaline at this point and use Death Swiftness as quickly as possible. Once you've activated Death Swiftness, sip an adrenaline potion and build up to 50% adrenaline and activate Rapid Fire, preferably before 25,000 HP. At 25,000 HP, Araxxor will drain your adrenaline by 50% and release a putrid acid wave. This acid wave acts a lot like the Dark Core from the Corporeal Beast. It will bounce around the room 4 to 5 times before targeting the player. When it falls on top of the player, they'll receive severe damage every game tick until they move. If they move off of it, the wave will bounce around the room several more times before targeting the player again. So if you do this effectively, you should not be hit by the wave more than once. Don't be afraid to eat lots and lots of food. This last 25,000 HP is where things tend to go wrong. If you have a portent of death, this is a great failsafe. If you die in the very, very end, it tends to revive you and finish Araxxi off. It can be a great way to get kills while you're still new. Thank you guys so much for watching. This video turned out way longer than I expected it would be, but there is just so much information to cover with Araxxor that there was no way to shorten it without omitting important details. I know it may feel like there's a ton of information, but I promise you that with enough practice you guys can get the hang of this and make some money for yourself. So I wish you good luck, and I hope my video was of use to you in developing your PVM skills. See you next time.